That is indeed what we do. Yes, that's right. Greetings, everyone. Tiki here, and welcome to the Survivor Storytellers. This next minute goes to my co-hosts, Ken and Casey. How y'all doing?
I'm doing great. I forgot to put the penner thing in the opening. So we don't. I just realized as soon as I hit live, like, oh wait, we should have had that. But okay, whatever. We'll have that for next season. I'm doing. I'm doing okay. Doing okay.
Hanging in there, buddy?
Wasn't the result I expected or wanted, but I'm doing okay. How about you, Casey? I'm sure you're over the moon.
Well, actually, I was okay. So, two things. One, I agree it was not the outcome I expected or had wanted, but I understand it, which obviously is what we will be diving into during this podcast. But as for anyone listening, that comment about me being, over the moon, I really like Jesse, but his edit was so dominating that I just wanted the outcome to be something unexpected, and I guess we definitely got that.
And I legitimately called this shit from like week 3.
Yeah, Tiki, I mean, I'm sure we could put a compilation video of me yelling Gabler's not going
I
to
would
win,
love
and
that.
It would be like 5 minutes long of me just berating you about how ridiculous.
There's no way that Gabler is going to. I'm like, I don't know. This season's kind of got some wonky editing. I'm kind of sensing some Gabon vibes.
I tip my headphones to you. Gabler, flippin' Gabler wins.
The man is intelligent. He might be eccentric, but he is intelligent. I think he proved that tonight.
Yeah. So I guess let's just kick it off, because obviously Gabler's the winner. So let's kick it off with that. So what do you all think about the story of Gabler? How was his edit this season? Do you feel like it makes sense?
Yeah, I do feel like it makes sense. I feel like, if anything, I almost kind of feel like they gave Cassidy a really solid edit in her own right, just to make that final result all the more surprising. Because for me, for my money, and Casey, you were right there. Laser Dude, I'm sorry to say, I was actually kind of like the opposite reaction you were having in Final Tribal Council, where I just vehemently did not want Cassidy to win. Not that I don't like her. Like, on a personal level, I think she's fine. As a TV character, I think she's decent. Like, she's got some snark to her. I don't necessarily think we saw that snark in the edit a lot. And I, frankly, like, as we were even going through that Final Tribal Council, I was just bracing, like, fuck, here we go. Like, the third person in a row to win, basically by just being under the radar and kind of, just coasting with the numbers. But no. So, yeah, I was basically rage texting Casey the whole time. Casey, you can confirm this.
I was cracking up. But let's keep it to Gabler.
Let me just say this. Yeah, let me say this. Gabler's game throughout has been one that I don't want to go into who deserved wins or whatnot. We like
the man did what he needed to do.
Game.
That's all I'm going to say.
They won their game, and however he got those votes, whether it's because somebody else made somebody else mad, or he just did the right things and made the right relationships. However he got those votes, he did get them. Nobody had a gun to their head forcing them to write Gabler's name down. However he got those votes, he got them, so he earns the win. I don't see it in the edit.
Okay.
I will say, like, I don't think the show showed Gabler's winning game, and I think that's because for a lot of people, they were as surprised that they were writing his name down as we were. I think for a lot, like, I will say this: Gabler's Final Tribal Council was very well. I'll give him a clap for that. I will say that it was like, I wouldn't necessarily put it as Todd Herzog levels.
No. It wasn't a Todd. It wasn't a Chris Daughtry, but
It was, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me actually of Tony in Winners of War. He didn't say anything mind-blowing. He highlighted a few parts of his game. He showed that he had a good rapport with the jury. They were laughing at him, they were
Uh-huh.
engaged with him, and he was giving them a good time, making them feel good about their vote. And whatever he said got backed up with people in the jury. And I think that was, if there was anything that was Cassidy's failing in this, is that what she said seemed to contrive with what the jury's actual view on the situation was, where Gabler, at the very least, had everything. I just don't see how he won. Like, people, sorry, Casey, just give me a second. People said in this final episode how Gabler's relationships and stuff that he made was the key, but we didn't see, almost like, we saw him talking with people, but for sure, but we didn't see like a friendship package or somebody
I think they
saying
could
how,
have.
like, I'm starting to, except for Ryan. Ryan had one. I will say Ryan had one, but I didn't really see too many
I think
others.
the big two that they really could have highlighted more in the edit that I will agree with you on is the rider dies with Cody and Jesse, because I mean that pretty much just came up like out of nowhere in the final tribal, and it came up a
I
lot.
didn't even know
in
that
the
had
final
a
tribal.
name.
Yeah.
And
right?
like Jesse and Cody were like the main characters of the season, so I'm honestly kind of shocked that that did not get really highlighted in the edit.
So that's the thing. I mean, there's a number of things that we could talk about, but for myself, I just want to keep it strictly to Gabler for a second. So I had said both to you guys on and off the record for this podcast that I was seeing Gabler in his confessional show that he was very much with all the votes.
Yeah.
He was with the major alliances. He had a sense of what was going on in the game and had a strategic mindset for what was the right moves. We did see that in his confessionals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, hold on.
Sorry. My bad.
Let me get through this real quick. So with
Casey, I'm gonna let you finish.
So with all that, we saw that in his confessionals, but I had also said plenty of times before that Gabler was someone who did not seem to be taken seriously. And we really actually only saw that in the beginning, but my perception of that just kept continuing episode and episode.
Yep.
But I think the number one thing that we really should have looked out for, and I think I also did mention it in our podcast, was in the episode he won his immunity. They took a very weird moment, but completely portrayed it as serious. That should have been actually a key identifier in the story of it all. And so we have that. We have his confessionals. And then for the final piece of his story, and in my mind, Cassidy, Gabler, and Owen, with maybe Owen being a little bit lower, they're all middle gamers. And I love to see a middle gamer ending. It's very exciting because I think, honestly, if you can play the middle game is the best spot in the reality of it because you're managing your threat level. Anyway, the strategy of that aside, so we saw that with Gabler in the beginning. We saw it with Gabler in the middle. And then at the end, he actually did play his final tribal very well. And so in the story of it all, they were showing us that, look, Gabler is pandering and performing very well at the end. And he's not bruising any of the jury's egos.
Yeah.
Now, alongside, and this is my last piece, and Tiki, you can speak. So alongside the vein of that sort of logic, right? But to a much more extreme example, you have someone like Russell, who was not managing the jury at all and was just pissing everybody off. He was pandering to them, making them feel good, lifting them up. And that is what elevated his game versus Cassidy's at the end. And he won because of it. That's it.
Okay. Oh, man. So a couple key notes I want to hit on with Gabler. You're absolutely right with that immunity challenge. That whole thing was just like one big Gabler like coronation edit in retrospect, if you go back and watch the season again. I've always said, like, even through this podcast, that literally the only person that had a real beef with Gabler was Ellie. And in the edit itself, Ellie was kind of meant to look like a fool. So I don't know. I have seen, like, I saw the writing on the wall for this just because I could see how unconventional the edit was going just in general, and I was kind of bracing for an unconventional winner. And I think this is, like, by all intents and purposes, it's an unconventional winner. The only
The
other
most unconventional winner is what, Chris Underwood?
well, yeah, but are you really going to say that he's a worse winner than like a Chris Underwood or like a Bob or a Fabio?
The things that, and this is personal. I want to strictly say that what I'm about to say is completely personal and not fair in terms
Okay.
of actual. I was rooting for Fabio and Bob. That's the difference for
Right.
someone like
Right.
me, where the show got me to root for
That
them.
makes sense.
And so when they won, even though I know that their games were not the strongest,
I mean, I would wager to say
still,
that. Sorry.
I would still, yeah, I would wager that Gabler played a better game than both of them.
Yes.
Absolutely. I would say that. I would agree to that. I would say that absolutely. Fabio only won because of two people quitting and getting him two challenges closer to the end. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
And Bob only won because Sugar had daddy issues, and that's that's
more or less, yes.
And so Gabler, at the very least, he didn't have to rely on any of that. He got here because of his gameplay. I would just, oh crap, I forgot what my point was.
I mean, I totally get it not being as satisfying.
I wasn't rooting for him the whole way. I viewed him as a Philip Shepard type character, as a type of character that was weird and didn't have a shot. And since I had accepted that from like the first episode, I mean, bad on me for not recognizing where the game turned, but I feel like it turned in the final episode, right?
I mean, y'all know me. I've always like long since wanted a scenario where we have a Philip Shepard type of player who then kind of sheds his craziness at Final Tribal Council. I think this is about the closest that we've gotten to something like that so far. So for me, I'm all over this. I think another like key thing with Gabler is the emphasis on the charity in that final episode, and I think a key to him winning is actually the fact that he did not bring it up at Final Tribal Council. I respected the hell out of that for the hell out of that.
Yeah,
like, because I think if he would have brought it up at Final Tribal Council, I honestly don't know if he wins. Because I think at that point, people would be like, well, fuck, am I just voting for the charity or am I voting for the best game, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, that was a very interesting thing. Now, with the Philip Shepards of the world, I feel like of all my friends that watched Survivor, I was the only one that was very much high on Philip Shepard during his second season. That's like, what's that?
So I agree with you. He's good in this second season. Like he was still crazy, but he's
a good player. But man, he dragged down that pre-merge, dude. The energy.
But yeah, so with that,
very negative energy is all I can remember from him.
Well, we don't typically see those types of winners win, and so I'm very excited. But yeah, I guess that's the thing. He actually shed that persona very early on. But yeah, once again, it was just a very, very distinct impression that it left on us, that it burned, into my mind throughout the entirety of that season. I also think, and this also might be an unpopular opinion, I was one of the people that thought that probably Nora deserved it more than the other two.
Yeah.
But she's another.
I can sign off on that.
Yeah, and she was another person who just wasn't taken seriously. It's that type of character that we often see. And with the whole Fabio of it all, how you were saying like they paint Fabio to be a very likable character. With Gabler, I was very surprised actually to learn this out on Thursday, but a number of my friends, especially the ones that I was playing Fantasy Survivor with, they actually all liked Gabler and were all loving that he won it. And I was like, wow, I was totally expecting you guys to say that you liked and wanted Cassidy to win. And they were like, well, yeah, we liked Cassidy as well, but Gabler was a character. He was a lot of fun, and I think his win was deserved. And I was like, oh, wow. But like I said before, I mean, I saw the writing on the wall. It's still not something that I thought would come to fruition, but I see what his story is, and I'm not opposed to it. I'm not angry about it. And if we only want our people that we like to win, we're going to be disappointed in a lot of our seasons that we watch.
Well said. Well said. All right.
I mean, however you watch the show, that's how you are to watch, to show. And rankings and how much you like a season is all personal. There are
Uh-huh.
some things that you can point to as why a season is good, but like I like Fiji a lot, and I can't really tell you why I like Fiji. It just resonates with me a lot. And but I think a season like this, for me, the winner plays a lot in where I feel about a season. And I know, as I said, this is personal. It's probably not a thing, but I would rank this out of the new era. I would rank it now the bottom out of the three. And I know that's not where you guys would place it. I think you'd probably place it number two.
Casey and I talked about this. I think we both put it in the middle. 42 is higher.
Yeah.
41 is lower.
Yeah.
I think it's just the
because
mid-season
41,
in
I
general.
41 just had very, very uneven storytelling. Like,
Yeah,
41 was
it
the
did.
type of season where it was like, okay, like it's the Shan show, and then we're gonna fucking develop the final 6 once Shan leaves, basically.
And something I would like.
It was
Something
Sorry, I was just gonna say. Sorry.
Go. Okay, so one thing I will like to say is, and this is a very common thing in reality storytelling, especially Survivor, is the main character does not always win the game. Just something to throw out there. And I think that is a very big thing for Survivor.
I mean, if that's the case, I certainly don't think Cassidy was the main character of this season either.
No, being the key that Jesse was the main character.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
because that was another thing, because there was also a lot of people that were really pissed off that Jesse didn't win, but that's his own fault, and we'll get to Jesse when we get
All right.
Yeah.
Look, we could literally sit here for like 2 hours debating if Gabler deserved to win or not, but I think we should probably move on to some of the other edits, if that's okay with you guys.
That's fine with me.
That's fine.
I mean, he's going to be a conversation, a part of all of these.
Definitely.
Yeah. Remember, to the story.
Yeah, we can turn to focus.
So Cassidy, like I said, I really think that the editors kind of deliberately gave Cassidy like a modern day winning female edit to throw us off, because I really think that like it was pretty much like pitch perfect, like beat for beat, more or less the type of edit that Erica got. And so I appreciated that the editors really screwed with us in that regard. And I will say that going into that final tribal council, I did not like anyone from a gameplay point of view. I liked everyone from a character point of view. Cassidy was probably my least favorite of those 3 from a character point of view, but I do think that with Cassidy, I think the big thing, storytelling wise even, and the edit did kind of point this out from time to time, is that she did like overrate her own game. And I think one of the times that the edit really did point that out was just how many times like throughout the season that she was harping on like, yeah, I got Ryan out. And it's like, and you guys know me, like I've hit on this before. It's like, first of all, good job on getting out like the biggest goat of the season. Like awesome. Like awesome job on your part. Ryan was never going to win.
To be fair, Courtney was never going to win, and we praised Sari for getting Courtney out. Sometimes getting
no. You're I was just about to say the only strategic benefit to getting them out would have been like a Sari situation where you specifically want to take away a spot in the finals, but I just don't think Cassidy was looking at it like that. I truly think it was just he wrote my name down, so therefore he has to go. And I honestly think that's just.
To be fair, Ryan came
also that episode
it
was split. Well, that episode it was him or her.
Okay, well,
so it's not like she blindsided.
It was him or her. You're absolutely right, and she just took way too much credit for that move, and I think rightfully she got fucked over for taking way too much credit in that move in the final tribal council. That really was, I think, what kind of killed her whole argument was when Jesse and Cody rebuked it. So I don't know. I really think Cassidy kind of got what she did.
From her perspective, she was pitching to Cody and Jesse and Gabler to get rid of him, and then they went with her and got rid of him. So from her perspective, she must have said the right things.
But she wasn't in the driver's seat with that vote, though, and that's what she was outing.
But from her perspective, she was, because she turned the vote. But she didn't know that it was like a coin flip on whichever one was voted out on the other group, the other one was going. She had no way of knowing that it was like really random chance and that her opinion had nothing in it. There was no way she could have known that. So
And I just honestly think that her
taking
main talking points of like, I won 3 immunities and I was always in the majority, like, those are technically good things for a winning game for sure. But Casey, you know me, this is what I was getting pissed off at. I was like, okay, so basically just don't make any fucking moves and you're going to win. Like, that's awesome. And I understand there's a thing with managing threat level, and we will get there when we talk about Jesse. I totally get the threat level thing. But I don't know. Like, if Cassidy would have won, it would have been 3. And I'm really trying to not put the her being female into the equation, because Marianne is a big character, and I don't think Marianne made a ton of moves in her season, but she made enough key moves. She had a signature move, if you will. I didn't want another Erica, frankly. I didn't want another like very, very low-key female who just kind of skirts by to the end because everyone else is a bigger target. I really didn't want that.
For myself,
I think Cassidy. Oh, you go ahead, Casey.
I was just going to say my thing for Cassidy is going to be short, because I feel like you guys are definitely going to speak a lot more in regards to this. I really liked Cassidy. She's the person who I thought was going to win. If Jesse wasn't in the finals, she was the person I wanted to win out of the 3. I liked all 3 of them. As for Cassidy's story, I think where I personally think she had definitely a better edit than Erica. Cassidy's big thing was she was completely ignored for a good portion of the beginning of the season in the edit.
Yeah.
She was only brought up, and still only brought up minimally, when she needed to be in the beginning of the season. And then it really wasn't until the second half of the merge that I feel like she got a really good, favorable edit.
Mm-hmm.
And that
I would say right around the time of Final 7.
Yeah, and as soon as the Sandy lie happened.
Yeah, I would say, like, yeah. And so that's the thing. It's like, like around the Final 7. Yeah, I'd say so. But that's the thing. I feel like that is where I find her story to be very confusing. She goes from invisible to there to then rising through the ranks as if she's now that middle gamer who is getting out the strategic threat. She was.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of an Ashley Underwood.
Ashley, I got to be honest, I'm not sure.
I'm blanking.
The final boss from Redemption Island.
Oh,
Blonde girl number 3.
Yeah,
where it's like throughout the whole season, she was pretty much invisible, and then like all of a sudden in the last couple episodes, we gotta be Ashley. Ashley is my
Rob's like, if I don't
threat.
beat her, I'm losing.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. That's
no, Cassie's. I went to answer. Cassie's edit was way, way better than that. I just think the trajectory of what you're describing is kind of similar.
For the story of it all. I just like I said, I just feel like she was painted, because I feel like actually Gabler, her, and Owen all actually got pretty fair edits for the type of players they were.
I'm actually really excited to talk about Owen's edit. I think Owen's edit was pretty unique.
Yeah, I just think for Cassidy, though, at the end of the day, her edit was a little bit too favorable. But I think, honestly, the key identifier on it all is just knowing that she was not as perceptive and or in the know as she thought she was, because I do think there were a couple bitter jurors, but 7 bitter jurors was not the case in this situation. So in terms of her story, a little bit too favorable, and she messed up a little bit, but just enough to allow Gabler the win.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. I am another person that personally I viewed, if I was in that situation, I would have voted for Cassidy. I felt like there's 2 types of players in the game of Survivor. There's the players you go to start a move, and the players you pick up to get the numbers to finish the move. You know, you know that like there's like Owen was a person you picked up when you already had a move going. You just needed another number.
I mean, if we're being honest, he was hardly even that most of the time.
Yeah, for most of the time. Yeah, he was just the person. We don't even need his vote.
Yeah.
But I
love
like,
Owen, but yeah.
And I felt like Cassidy was more a person that people were going to make moves. And I felt like Gabler was a person who was being picked up to use as a vote to do a move. And there's nothing wrong with either type of player, but I kind of like look at like the one who was like a collaborator, if you will, as the more active player in the game. And so I felt like she was the more active player. I felt like she had a lot more stuff. Like she didn't have, unfortunately, the move to point to is like this was my thing, and I was full on
I
that.
mean,
She
sometimes
got
that's all
Carla
it
out,
takes, though.
but
Gabler had that.
here's the thing about Gabler. Ellie was probably gonna go anyway. She was overplaying that hand so
But
hard, but
Gabler
it was
really
at the
turned the ship on that,
merge.
though. I mean, Gabler did a lot of work with that.
I mean, yeah, but it was at the merge and it was one of his own numbers, and everyone was gonna flock on that. It wasn't like it was a super hard, complex move to pull off, and Ellie was overplaying all sides there, and it could have just burned herself at that point anyway. So I don't know how much I can like. It's a move. It's not really all that impressive to me. I find it more impressive for the person who was in the know and voted correctly every single vote. Once again, personal preference, and there's more to the game of Survivor than just voting correctly every single time. If someone's in the wrong every single time, but they are, doing great social relationships and they win because of that, good on them. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, for me personally, I respected Cassidy's game more than Gabler's.
I mean, I just think Cassidy's game was boring, just frankly.
It is boring, but that's how you win in the modern game.
No, I know. And that's
I,
why I was not rooting for her, because I did not want the meta of the modern game to become even more just like, okay, just sit back and do nothing.
But also in the story of it
so
all for
I
the final three,
yeah.
is any of their games or any of their stories really that exciting? No.
I think with Gabler, I think there is a lot of merit to me personally, and Laser, like you said, this is like a subjective thing, but I think there is merit to him making a bold move with Ellie. I think within that Ellie episode, the thing that was impressive to me was how he kind of navigated around the idea of him being a traitor to his own tribe, still kind of came out on the other side of it, and then had the forethought to basically just kind of like duck back down. Whereas Cassidy, there's just nothing compelling at all to me about someone who's just like, I'm gonna stick with the numbers. I'm just gonna ride the waves. And
we were trying not to get into the who should win. I'm sorry, I brought that in.
Sophie is one of my favorite winners. This is like the last thing I'll say. Sophie is one of my favorite winners, and one could make the argument that she played a very similar game to Cassidy. But the difference there is that the two people that were up against her in the end were both just absolute gigantic asshats. Whereas Owen and Gabler, I mean, they're not the best players in the world by any means, but they're both genuine dudes. Like they both seem like good people. Whereas fucking Coach and Albert, it's like you don't like. I mean, as much as I love Coach as a character, he was an absolute douchebag, especially on that season. And Albert, just get out of here. Albert was just PU. So I really do think it comes down to, it's a case-by-case basis. Because like I said, Sophie is absolutely one of my all-time favorite winners. And she basically had the same sort of gameplay that Cassidy had. But I think it's a season-by-season, where that season really didn't have any flow. Anyways, but yeah, you're right. We should move on to Owen. So, all right. Can we both agree that we're both pretty, Laser Dude?
Well, I'm beautiful, but no. Yes, we can agree to disagree. Absolutely.
Okay.
Owen's game, I've been fascinated by it this whole time, because it's the guy who knows how to play Survivor. He knows all the rules. He knows all the strategies. He knows everything down to a T. He's not making any big social mistakes. He's not even making any huge strategic mistakes. But for some reason, he ends up playing a terrible game, and he knows it. He's like, this whole game, and he's like, I tried. I did my best. It just didn't work out for me. And honestly, I just always felt bad for him, but he didn't make mistakes except for maybe that one fight with James, but he just ended up on the wrong side of the vote, and sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles, and for him it happened over and over again.
What's really interesting to me about Owen's edit is just like I felt like it was kind of almost unconventional from the get-go with the fourth wall break with the intro shot. I mean, that was that kind of cued me in right there that, okay, either this guy is going to be voted out first, and they threw in that intro shot there as like, you know, a little like, oh, well, he's a nice guy. It's sad that he got voted out first. We might as well just give him, you know, throw him a bone. When he did not get voted out first, I pretty much was like, okay, that intro shot thing, like he's going places. He's going far, and I was right. I do really like how they had all the fourth wall breaks, you know, like of course the list of idols and advantages. That was wonderful. Even stuff down to in the last episode where we have that little bell sound effect when he gets the puzzle. I like really, really interesting stuff just as far as the edit kind of playing around with the format with him in a few instances. I almost wonder if they toned down some of his more cantankerous stuff because he strikes me as the kind of person that gets frustrated very, very easily. And I'm willing to bet there were probably some Nick Wilson style meltdowns that we just were not privy to in the edit.
I think we saw a lot of his meltdowns.
We did.
This episode we did.
I think I have a feeling it
like
was
before
more,
they were just like, shucks. And this one's like,
right. I have a feeling it was less the meltdowns that they toned down and more so just his day-to-day personality. I really think the reason why people didn't want to work with him is because he was in a sour mood a lot of the time. That's my theory, at least. I mean, the guy, he literally says in episode 2 that he's like, what's he say? How does he describe? He's like the cantankerous, like the lovable cantankerous guy or something like that.
We did see Ellie said that Owen requires more management.
Right.
So maybe he did have a little bit more paranoia and stuff and the show didn't really show it because his edit was just the Charlie Brown football thing. So
I'm glad we got the Charlie Brown football edit though, because I think it was a fun ongoing storyline. You could feel his frustration. You could root for him, but at the same time, like, it's not like any of us actually thought he had a chance to win going into that final. So
that's the very interesting thing about Owen's story. And actually, I very much like it. I think it's very much a story that naturally, especially to Americans, I feel like we definitely like to root for the underdog. He definitely had the underdog story. His story was very unique compared to a lot of people we've had in the past. I feel like I know his game so well. And sometimes, and it's crazy, it happens in a lot of different reality competitions. And for us orgers who play these games, it happens to people as well. Sometimes when you're on the bottom, it's hard to ever get back up to the top because it's usually you're out.
I mean, even in Prometheus, Casey, we saw a situation where like, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't watched season 2, but let's just say just based on who was in what breakout rooms at what time, that pretty much cast the tone for the entire game for one tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. We see that story element a lot. And I liked, in my mind, what was told as a very it was very genuine. It was honest. Mm-hmm. It was raw.
Totally.
And it's the type of raw emotion that I do like to see because you can tell his frustration. Mm-hmm. Not only are you mentally exhausted, you're physically exhausted, you're starving, mm-hmm. you're thirsty. And on top of that, you're trying to win $1 million, and every fucking time you try and do something, it's once, as he says, it's the Charlie Brown, taking of the football, and it's just frustrating. And I actually like to see the way his story was painted, and even after all of that, it wasn't a like, oh, this guy's throwing a temper tantrum. I felt really bad for him. I actually probably felt bad for him more than anyone else in this season. I like the story. I really like his story. I just feel bad for him in the after show.
When do you guys think was the moment he completely lost the game? Because I was thinking about like last season after the double vote off of Roxroy and Tori. I feel like that was when Romeo's game was just completely neutered because they needed someone to be the GOAT and he was the only one left. And so nobody viewed him as a threat. Nobody gave him anything until, Marianne, I guess, a little bit at the end. And I think for Owen, it was when Justine went home.
Ooh,
He had
wow,
a chance
that early.
with the Justine blindside of James. If he got into a strong alliance that started taking people's names and started going and then voted off Justine at the end, I think that could have been his chance. But as soon as Justine went, he was just on the outs again.
Are you talking
And I think that
Janine,
was
not
when
Justine?
Yeah, Janine. Sorry, I always.
Okay, just making
No,
sure.
not Janine. Sorry, not even Janine.
I'm just making
I'm
sure,
getting
because at first when
Noelle.
you said Justine, I was
I
like,
meant
oh
to
wow,
say.
that was really
I
early.
meant to say. Yeah. Oh boy, I'm
She
so
wasn't
bad.
even
No,
on his
I
tribe.
meant to say Noelle. I got Noelle and
Oh,
Justine. I think it
Noelle.
was when
Okay.
Noelle went.
Got
It was
it.
when
Got it.
Noelle went. It was after James. I think after Noelle got blindsided, he was gone. His game was like completely.
I agree,
gone
because
after that
Noelle,
point.
that was like the one person who genuinely did really want to work with him.
Well, actually, that's a very interesting point too, because I will say this. I'll make it quick because I do want to just really try and focus on the story. But Owen has said actually since the season has ended that Noelle was the one person he actually was sure he was pretty much getting a vote from, which I think actually further solidifies that Noelle was not a bitter juror. She was not this. She was not that. She voted Gabler because she thought Gabler was deserving of the win.
There is one person in particular that we are going to talk about that I really think was a very, very bitter juror, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess
do you guys feel that Owen? Sorry, I just want to say, do you guys feel like Owen kind of gave up? Because I know, like, when he was telling his story at the final tribal council, he was honest. He told everyone what happened. He painted himself as the underdog, but it kind of was almost like, in a way, that it was like, yeah, I tried, guys. It's like it didn't really feel like.
I think he knew that there wasn't a lot he could say. I don't necessarily think he was giving up. I honestly think at that point he was probably just happy to make the final tribal council.
So I'll say that with that, it's not that he gave up. He's very hard on himself. And it is something they touched upon in the after show. I think he controlled his own narrative by very much being defeatist and screwed what little chance, but still a chance, what little chance he had of winning.
Yeah.
Yes, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah. I mean, look, it was a crappy scenario for him all around. He didn't even get to make the fire, but he didn't really have too much else to hang his hat on. But I would say that lie, pretend you were. I don't know. I mean, that's probably wouldn't have been a good thing too. But I sympathize for his situation. I do. I don't know what I would have done in the same situation. Maybe I would have done the best thing, make a good showing of it, but. Yeah, accept reality. All right,
Okay.
Moving on.
I guess we're talking about probably one of the biggest players of the season. Clearly the main character of the season.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This emotionally fucking broke me, and I say that in the best way possible. I like watching this whole thing go down. Like, basically, as soon as we saw the confessional, like before the tribal council, where Jesse is like barely keeping it together, like talking about how much pressure he's under, I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is going to be super painful to watch." And for me, it really was. I mean,
I got spoiled.
well, I'm glad I didn't.
Uh,
I feel like in some ways I got kind of spoiled just on the basis that like I kind of figured that Owen and Gabler were going to make the finals together because that twosome has been emphasized a lot over the past couple weeks. But yeah, I mean, it was probably one of the most emotional eliminations I've ever seen on Survivor. Like, I honest to God don't think I've been that emotional since the Yao Man thing went down back in the day.
Oh yeah, that's a while back.
Yeah, no, but I'm serious. Like, and now I want to emphasize though, Casey, I do agree with you. Jesse absolutely did not control his threat level. Like, that is absolutely something I agree with as far as his game and why he got voted out. And hell, I think if anything, if I was in his shoes, I would maybe not show off that idol at Final Five and instead save it for like a Marianne situation.
No, guys, I'm going to have to hard disagree. I think he handled his threat level as well as you can possibly do in this modern game. The problem, and this is where he went wrong, if you would say, he didn't have any shields at the end. If he could have found a way to go to that Final Four with him and Carla, and he tried, I like to think that he tried, then at the very least, like there's a possibility that someone's coming for Carla. I feel like modern players need to take not the manager of the threat level, because he did that all the way he went to the Final Five. Like,
Yeah.
how much more can you manage? You got to wait till Final Four to make a move. There's no more time to make any more moves.
I absolutely hear what you're saying. That's kind of why I was so frustrated at him getting out, in spite of the fact that I do completely understand why people left in the game wanted him out. Because, I mean, let's face it, that Cody move wasn't just a big move. Like, it was a historic move. It was one of the all-time greatest moves in the history of the game. I think, honestly, it probably single-handedly, like, elevates the season to a certain extent.
Absolutely. I just think that, like, I just think that the modern players need to learn the lesson from Wendell and Dom. They need to go to the end with other players who are just as threatening as they are, if not more.
It makes sense. I totally hear what you're saying. Yeah.
And it's like it's so, and it's harder because when you get in the game of Survivor, the big threats are outnumbered by the minor and non-threats. There's in any game of Survivor, there's going to be only about 3 or 4 big threats in the game. Like, let's say this season, the biggest threats of the game was Carla, Jesse, Noelle at one point, and James. Those were the 4 that people viewed as big threats to win the game. But 4 people is a lot less of a number than any. I just think that it's harder. I just think that that was his failing grade. If he could, if Carla could have just trusted him a step more, I think maybe he could have made it.
But of course, we did see that if Jesse did give Carla the idol, then he would have been fucked. So
okay, well, even that aside, so I mean, with Jesse, his game, he was obviously such a dominant screen presence. And he did have his cooldown periods. When we look at the storytelling of all the Edgic, Tiki, as you are very, very familiar with, he had a very typical winner's edit of, his cooldowns and his hot streaks. But with that, though, I just feel like, from a very early on point, they try to make him as sympathetic as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that did portray his character very well. It made him the main character of the season. Personally, especially given that we know that at the end of his story, he doesn't win and he seemingly seems a little bit bitter. I kind of wish they wouldn't have painted him as sympathetic in the beginning.
You know what? I am like as hard as it was to watch. I'm glad that they went that hard because honestly, I feel like modern day Survivor tends to under edit people who get screwed over or who barely make the, or who barely make the final tribal council. Or, I mean, there's certainly examples still of big characters that do get cut right before the end. But I feel like more often than not, it's one of those, like, for example, last season, Lindsay was the fire making loser, and she wasn't like a bad presence or anything like that. But certainly,
she was out at 5. It was Mike versus Jonathan in the fire making.
Oh, you're right. It was Jonathan at Final Four. My bad.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is with Jesse. I don't know. I honestly want to see more raw emotion like this, because as hard as it was for me to watch, I genuinely, like, I felt like I was in Jesse's shoes. Like, I felt the seething disappointment and just the whole, because Casey, you know me with my anxiety and everything. Like, if I set to my mind to something and I don't do it, it is like the end of the world to me.
But the thing is I just feel like
I can't imagine. 1 second, and I can't imagine going on this journey, like with all the hardships that come with it. The lack of sleep, the hunger, the everything, and the elements, and just having the family on your shoulders for that long, and then falling right at the end when you knew that that is powerful.
It is
storytelling to me.
It is, but also at the same time, it's like, dude, I have now heard you, I've heard this very sympathetic story a million times. It's losing its weight by the time we get to the end of the season, especially for someone who doesn't end up winning. And then also, I will say that, from that player's perspective, it's like he's really acting as if none of the other contestants have families. He has a fucking PhD. He has a PhD in political science. Yeah, he did start from really bad beginnings, as we were told as part of his backstory. But it's just like, I feel like it was laid on really, really, really thick, especially for someone who doesn't win. And it didn't make me feel crushed even more so at the end. And everyone is different, because clearly you were crushed. But it's just like, I feel like, yeah, we could have actually taken out some of the early stuff just a bit. We could have dialed it back and focused on other people who maybe got a little bit underrepresented in the early story. But overall, his story was clear. He was very much an anti-hero. And I mean, good job on them. Good job on them. But they could have also just at the same time given it a little bit more to our final 3 by taking just minutes here and there from him. I mean, I will say this one last thing, and then I'll leave it to you, Ken. We talked about it. I think it was episode, I don't know, must have been around episode 8 or something like that. Maybe episode 9. The one post-challenge segment is almost entirely dedicated to his plan.
Is this the Noel vote?
That was the Noel vote.
That was the one thing with Jesse's edit that I agree was a little over the top.
It was a really cool editing piece, and I really liked it. Something very unique, and I definitely love and encourage Survivor to do more of those things, because for a while they very much got into a standard sort of format. So I like that they're spicing things up. But that story piece, it was all about pulling together one move that did end up paying off, but nothing else to the story. No suspension of disbelief, no red herring, no nothing. No, like, it was such an insane, dominating screen presence. And I would argue, in terms of all the editing in all 43 seasons, there has never been a singular segment piece that dominating before.
I agree with you.
Disagree. Tony, Winners at War, the episode where he gets extracted for coins. Like, the entire episode was him get fire tokens. That when he they used that entire episode was him getting coins from other players, then using those coins to get his vote back, then winning the immunity challenge, and then using all the stuff that he's gathered to blindside Sophie. That episode, the entire episode was basically about Tony, not just like after the merge, I would say. But anyway, your point is still valid. It's like, it's a really sorry, my mind just has to disagree.
It's all good, but I mean, all good.
Jesse, is definitely the breakout star of this season. I'm worried how he's going to do on a return trip, and he's definitely going to do a return trip. But I feel like he is a big flashing target. But in terms of his story, I feel like the editors, the problem they've been using a lot of crutches early on in this show. They've been using a lot of flashbacks to explain story elements that are too tricky to
Mhm.
put into the main episode. They've been using a lot of family stories to get you emotionally invested in right away. But I think you're right. Is it's like sometimes we can just let the story tell itself. We saw in previous seasons, we saw like Boston Rob and Tyson get emotional at being so close to the end and be what they're going to do for their families. But we didn't see anything like that from earlier, and so it made us feel like this was the motion we were getting emotionally invested. So I think Survivor, not that you can't tell empowering or emotional stories, just don't use it as a crutch. Like, hi, this is this person, and here's their very sad and tormenting story. Let it unfold more naturally in the future.
I totally agree. I think this season absolutely had too many flashbacks and sob stories at the beginning. That was one thing that towards the first few episodes I was like, okay, like like I think we probably got like it was when we started getting multiple like origin stories around the same subject. Like we got 2 or 3 just based on Noelle's story, which Noelle has a great story, but it's a little bit of a crutch.
Yeah. Oh, a crutch because she has one leg? How dare you,
Oh my
Tiki?
god. All right.
Okay. On that note, we should move on to Carla.
Yeah, Carla is, I think, probably one of the biggest examples I can think of right now of someone who was very popular in the pre-merge and then just burned a whole hell of a lot of goodwill as the post-merge went on.
Yeah.
And I will throw this out there. I don't think it's necessarily Carla's fault that Gabler won, but I do think it's Carla's fault that Gabler won in a landslide.
He was one vote away from a perfect game.
I absolutely think that Carla poisoned the jury against Cassidy. I
don't think so.
What?
I don't think so.
Did you listen to interview? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it could have been a possibility, but something I even thought about after the finale is that it's 7 people who did end up voting for Gabler, and in addition to that, even as we all thought there were going to be potentially a couple votes going towards Owen, most notably Noelle and Janine, and even they didn't vote for him. They voted for Gabler. So clearly, like I said, there was a lot more going on at play. But I think
Carla was like undeniably bitter, though, right?
Oh,
like,
100%. She was. So was Jesse. But I do think that if you were to just base it off the story they were constructing, yes, it makes it seem like Carla was that. But I think there's enough evidence in the show as well as the postseason content to know that maybe one person might have been, maybe the votes wouldn't have been as crazy, but I think Gabler would have still won.
Okay.
The way I see this, who you put on the jury and how is just as much as gameplay as them as just voting people out. It's like in general. I think that when you look at like let's say Parvati in Micronesia, she put those 2 girls that were so loyal to her on that jury, but made it in a way that looked like she didn't really betray them. And so who's stumping for her on that jury? Those 2 girls are probably talking all about how great she is and everything. And to be fair, like in the long run, when it comes down to it, Carla was mad and was bitter, and I'm not sure how much Cassidy could have done to smooth that over, but she could have not engaged her in arguments and stuff like that. Could have been like, look, I don't know why we came at odds, but I'm gonna be voting against you and everything. But she engaged her and made her feel bad, and that's just the way it is. That's how sometimes the game goes. And I believe you're right, Casey. I don't think she doesn't have that much sway over all of those people to make their votes go that way. For whatever reason, they voted for Gabler because they thought that he played the better game.
But what you just said, Ken, I do think that does have to do with why Gabler did win, because, you know, Cassidy was basically trying to take credit for moves that other people had made alongside her. Whereas Gabler, his whole argument was that he made the one signature move and then kind of went into stealth mode. And I really think that nobody was upset with Gabler voting them out at all, because he was friendly with everyone, but he wasn't overly loyal to any one person. He was his own ride or die, as he said. So I do think that definitely kind of played a factor, because Cassidy, she was more socially connected to him, but by that point, it did make her blind sights just, you know, sting a little bit more. I don't know.
Well, here's a question I want to find out, because we talked about before that we were going to talk about the 3 players that we would personally bring back in a future season. I'm curious if Carla would be on anybody's list, because I feel like you know, like, while she was one of the biggest characters of the season, I'm not sure how many people's list she would be to be demanding
Like
to
I
be
said,
brought back by the way her game ended.
I think as a character and as a player, she kind of flamed out.
Okay, so let me say 2 things. One, because I didn't really get to say my take on Carla, but then I want to answer your question,
go ahead.
Ken. So for Carla, I actually think that by the end of the season, her story was probably among one of the most complete. I definitely saw someone who also, based on all the preseason content, was not expecting to make it any more than a couple episodes. I think her story really led her to be very unassuming, rising through the ranks, being a part of all the power dynamics, being ahead of all the power dynamics as well, most notably her and James, as it was discussed. And then seeing how her threat level got too big, and then her descent into being tricked and then booted from the game. Carla's story very much in that regard was complete, with the only missing portion of her story being that everyone somehow knew she had the idol, and then we found out episodes later that everyone pretty much knew she had it, but we never even knew that when everyone thought she had it, if that makes sense. Because they did say a couple episodes later, oh, well, everyone's known that Carla pretty much has the idol. It's like, where the hell has that information been the last couple episodes? So, like, that should have been part of her story that we did not get.
Yeah, I think that was Jesse who suggested it, but like, yeah, so maybe not everybody knew, because like some people only knew when Cassidy told her. But yeah, anyway, sorry, you continue on.
But yeah, I mean, that's like most of, I guess, what I have to say about Carla at this point. I really like Carla. I think her bitterness towards the end definitely soured her for me a bit, but I think her story was pretty complete. Definitely one of the better stories told. And as for the returning people, I think number 1 on that list has to be Ellie. And I'm not just saying that because I really thought I was very high on her in the preseason content, because I also thought she was going to be the winner pick. But I think now there's a lot more that she could fight for. I think she is a smart player, but her perception.
She also has a direct tie to a winner.
That's true too. I think Ellie is the number 1 person that should be coming back. I'm always about giving potential colorful first boots a second chance. So I think that Mariah is potentially up there as well. And then Carla and Jesse's bitterness makes me not really want to see them again. So I want to give people a chance to really play the game. So I think maybe, even though I wasn't super high on him, Dwight, who got screwed out of being a part of the jury.
Oh, yeah. Your picks are...
I want to see interesting or potentially good game players.
I think for me, Dwight, I'm sure he is an interesting person in his own right. But as the edit goes, I really feel like he was probably the most like thrown under the rug out of any of the cast. And I think not making the jury absolutely has to do with that for sure. But
Tiki, who would you bring back, unless you need a moment to think?
Yeah, no, Cody would absolutely be my number 1, you know, in spite of the fact that, like, I know
I switch out Mariah for Cody.
Oh my.
No, I know. Like, Cody is a very polarizing character.
Tiki, I would love to go back in time and show your past self.
No, I remember. But here's the thing, like, even like the thing that I find compelling about Cody is that I feel like he can be both like a very, very big-hearted person and in the same breath be super cocky. And what was rubbing wrong with me about him in the first couple episodes was just it was all about how cocky he was, more or less. Whereas I feel like I started to like him more once we got into some of his personal stuff, some of the stuff, how he related to Noelle, how hard he struggled to vote out NECA. He's a very complex character for me, so I would definitely have him back. I would honestly love to see Owen back just to give him another shot to do something. I think he's the type of player where if he had a better starting tribe, a better draw, if you will, he could potentially do something with it. It's not like he's unintelligent. And then, I was going to go with Noelle for a female returnee, but I'll second the Ellie thing. I think Ellie definitely has some potential, and she, you could kind of hype up that she was Gabler's victim and stuff like that on the return. So, yeah, those would probably be my main three. Jesse, I honestly think, Casey, I am a little bit with you that I think the dude needs to take some time in between games, both to lessen his threat level and to kind of like clear his head of the clear emotional toll that the game took on him. But I would like to see Jesse again, just maybe a few years down the line.
For me, the three players, number one has to be Jesse. I think when you play a game like that, I like you would have to be my number one, just the same as Omar was my that season before that, and how Shan was my season before that. Number two is definitely Cody as well. I think Cody is a no-brainer. I think Cody could be very dangerous on a second watch.
I totally
feel
agree.
like he has. I think Cody has a similar, and I would love to actually see Cody and Jesse back on like opposite tribes to start the season and see if how those players go against each other. Now is like he was betrayed, he was backstabbed. How far do you trust him? Do you trust him at all, or do you have to get him out? Even though he might be your friend in real life. I think that could be an interesting dynamic. And for my last one, I'm actually going to say Noelle. I think Noelle would have a really fun shot. I think that it'd be cool to, like, out of all the players that have played who's been amputees, she's the one that's had the best strategic edit. I feel like she actually has game, and I feel like her having one leg would not be as big of a threatening thing to some people on a returning players trip. I feel like she would have a chance to actually play her game that she didn't fully get to play in this season, and she still played really well in this season. I mean, as Jesse said, he's like, we vote on our allies, she gets a new one. She's like shopping at Walmart for allies. She just gets them on discount. So yeah, those would be. It's all Vesey. It's all Vesey all the way, I guess, for me. But
Vesey was a very strong tribe of characters. So
yeah. Right.
One last little.
Go ahead.
Well, two last things actually, really quick. One, just on the Noelle train of things. I want to say that I really, really, really appreciate Noelle's story. As while it was there, it was not. She is a one-legged woman.
Yeah.
And this is her story. So I really appreciate the depth, especially as the story went on, to being she is more than just her accident. I absolutely
more so became that. About the whole thing where she would just keep picking up allies that, like, in the leg thing, had nothing to do with it.
And that was great. I mean, obviously that is a big part of her, so it has to be there, but it wasn't the focus like we would have had for plenty of other different players with plenty of other disabilities in the past. And then my last little final thought here is on the non-story side of things, if we're talking about strictly the strategic side of things, if you really want a good way to think about the ending result of this game, watch at least the first 20 minutes of the Survivor Know-It-Alls podcast for the finale.
Mm.
They summarize it, and they do it right after the finale. They're very clear-headed about the thing, and that is why they're the know-it-alls. So it's just a very interesting piece. So if anyone is listening and wants to hear that, go check that out.
All right. I would say that any excitement for 44, but its podcast's already gone on a long time, so we'll save that.
Someone coming from Western Canada is going to be on it. Some guy
that's
from
cool.
Saskatoon.
Nice.
Everyone else that has been on the show has been from like Toronto, Ontario. Like, someone from the West Side finally coming on there. So, good for that. Good for that.
I will say I am a little bit worried that they're like openly advertising like a serious medevac type situation is like a selling point for the season.
He did the same for Co-Wrong.
That's true. We'll see. All right.
So thanks for watching, everybody. I am Ken.
I'm
Casey.
And we are the Survivor Storytellers, and it's what we do. Bye.